Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meridith Elliott-Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
Let's turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I'm Meridith Elliott-Powell, and welcome to Ask for Change. I am really excited about today's guest because I think it is going to be one of the most unique and informative conversations we have had in a while. He calls himself the Near Futurist, and once you hear why, you're going to understand exactly why he's on this podcast. Neil Redding has spent more than 3 decades working at the convergence of technology and business, helping organizations get ready like this. Visa, Nike, Apple, and Verizon really create real practical value. He's built and led near future innovation teams inside firms like Mediacom, Gensler, and ThoughtWorks. He's spoken everywhere from South by Southwest to the Dubai Future Forum, and today we have him here. Please welcome Neil Redding. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Meredith. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I realize we both have very bright light behind us coming through. Thanks to our neighbor, the sun.
Yeah, well, I am always grateful for it. It's never really good for afternoon sessions, but still, I'll take it. So, Neil, I want to start with this concept and this idea of near futurist. I mean, what is that? What does it mean? I'm assuming you coined it because I never heard it before. So what exactly is, what do you call yourself as a near futurist? What does it mean? And what value does it bring to the audience?
Sure. So, I could talk for a while about how I got this place, like 30 years into my career as a computer scientist and philosopher, the things I studied in college. We can come back to that, but the real punchline is that the near future is the most critical, like 12 to 24 months for business leaders. I think have existed in my lifetime of being in the professional world for over 30 years. And this is really because the disruption and the opportunity of AI is so unprecedented. And I think we'll get into why that is, but the near future is the one to really plan for. And there value people who do prediction and trends and foresight further out, but if I don't get the next 12 to 24 months right, my argument is that business leaders are going to be leading companies that are just not set up for the duration.
So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So it's the idea that we're really just planning and strategizing for the near future and going to be in a constant state of updating, shifting, and changing?
So yes, I think is the short answer. I think you hear a lot of people talking about the critical importance of adaptability as the new critical capability that we have. Things are changing. The capabilities of technology and the capabilities of people using this technology are evolving more quickly than we've ever seen. And so the traditional approach to business, which we've applied for many, many decades, right? Over 100 years, is we create a plan. Maybe it's an annual, it's a business plan for the business, and there's maybe an annual plan for the coming 12 months, and then we essentially execute to plan. And in this hierarchical organization, we do essentially command and control, right, from leadership on down, assignment, delegation of responsibility, tasks, etc. But given how quickly things are changing, plans are just nearly immediately out of date. And so what is more amenable, I think, to this period of continuous high velocity evolution of capabilities is something much more like we see in nature, where you have diverse species collaborating together in ecosystems. And I take a lot of inspiration actually from the way forest ecosystems particularly work. We can talk about that, but there is, I think, this volatility, this of capability is the new normal, and I think being able to roll with that kind of capability change is critical. So I do think that the era of plan and execute and control is going to be replaced by a new mode of leadership, which we can talk about.
And so I love the fact that you take a lot of your inspiration from nature. I'm actually coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina, and one of the big reasons I live in Asheville, North Carolina, is the is is definitely the nature and the inspiration that I take from it. I'm interested, and I do think that there is quite a bit to be learned. I love the fact that we think we're in this new age world, and the truth is the answers have been around us truly forever. But there's so much I want to unpack here, so much I want to talk about. So you say this is unprecedented, like we've never really been through this level of disruption. And is it all AI, or help us understand what, like when you speak to audiences or you're working with a client, how do you explain to them what they're experiencing?
Mm. So it kind of depends on what kind of audience. So
Yeah.
one of the audiences that I've been speaking a lot to recently is people who lead HR for big companies, CHROs. And for them, I think the most relevant framing of what's happening is that as AI is able to take on more and more of the doing, which I think any of us who have been using AI chatbots, agents, experience this, right? That if we give them the right context, they can do a lot of the work we've done, whether it's writing an email or a LinkedIn post or even creating a website, creating a spreadsheet, all kinds of things, right? Creating a PowerPoint for your keynote. Um, but as AI does more of the work, you're moving into this new role that's more of being a decider, right? So doers to deciders is the shift that we're living through now. I think it's the early stages of it, but all of us, I would argue, who are using this technology have had this experience, right? And so that, to answer your question about what is it and how do we understand what we're living through here, the shift from doers to deciders is not just a kind of simple mechanical one. Oh, now I used to do this thing, now I do this thing. But because so many of us, especially after we've been doing what we do for long enough to be an expert, right, the 10,000 hours of work to become an expert, and now that we see, or as we see this technology be able to do that work at an expert level, it creates this kind of identity crisis, right? And I think that is
Yeah.
one of the next emerging phases of sort of social or humanity level grappling with like what is being unleashed here, right? It's causing us to reflect on, well, if my expertise in this area that I've been practicing for decades is not is just replicable, that I can do this, then who am I? What is my identity, given that it's not this capability or this expertise I've associated with my identity for so long? So that is a real challenge. I think there's also, like with all challenges, there's a huge opportunity for us all to get really great at making decisions. Decision making is more tiring and I think more rewarding ultimately than a lot of the doing that many of us have been doing for so long. And we hear about 70+% of people in the workforce are disengaged, right? You hear
Yeah.
statistics like this, which is a real sad state of affairs, honestly, for humanity. Like where most of us spend most of our waking hours at work, and 70+% of us are disengaged. Like, what are we doing, right? That needs disruption anyway. That state of living for humanity, and so um, not to say that we're going through is not going to be challenging, but I do think that it needs to be disrupted. I would argue we need to, as humans, or at least we have the opportunity to have a way of life and a way of spending our time that is much more engaging, much more satisfying than I think the way the majority of us are spending our work days. So I'll stop there with that. But I think that's one of the kind of mental model doers deciders that I share with people. I can share one more,
Yeah.
which is, when I'm speaking to leaders, I often will lead um, corporate strategy sessions, keynotes for executive leadership at a single company, or sometimes CEO gatherings across different companies. And building on this fact that AI is now able to do so much of this work, it's shifted from being this tool we use into an active participant. Um, we have, the best people at organizations can now build working tools or create new workflows in an afternoon. And then when they try to get that thing they built approved, it can take weeks even to like convene the committee to have the discussion about do we approve this. So this huge gap between how fast AI lets people execute and how slow organizations make decisions. I call this gap clock drift, and it's creating this incoherence within companies that when I speak to C-levels especially, there's this vigorous nodding of heads and like, how can we speed up our decision making? Because that's the thing that's become very, very poignant. Is we can't keep up with our decision making speed, and we need, we've evolved for decades these operating procedures and ways of making decisions that just can't keep up. So like, what we do, this is the problem, and the solution, I think, is I try to cover in my keynote and these sessions that I lead.
So one thing that I think is interesting in that, and I'd be really curious to get your take on it, is you said it basically at the beginning when you were coming in. We've built these operating procedures. We're in a command and control world, and in the world we live in now, command and control just doesn't work. But here is the problem. I think we've been in command and control honestly since about 2008. I think when the market blew up in 2008, a lot of baby boomers were going to retire. They said, oh my God, we can't retire because the market's in the tank, our business is in trouble. And we came back in and we got in this command and control. Employees put their head in the sand because they just didn't want to get fired. Just as we started to come out of that, COVID hit and everybody went back into the same type of environment, and we're a little stuck there. So when you think about decision making, I mean, I think about the years that we've lost the ability to critically think, which is one of the biggest reasons I think that employees are disengaged. I don't think people want to be disengaged at work. I just think they're like, what do I care? They're not going to allow me to make a decision or be a part of it anyway.
It's resignation.
I mean, I just think that people, I've got 2 kids, I got to put them in college, I got to pay a mortgage, and my parents don't have a retirement plan, so I'm just going to keep my head down, be quiet, and they don't give me an opportunity anyway. So so when you think about, I love this idea of talking about the fact in the world of AI. I was listening to an interview yesterday with a couple of sharks from Shark Tank, and they were asking them what their competitive advantage was, and they said their competitive advantage was speed. They just move faster. They have made a decision, they failed, and they've made another decision by the time their competitor is making their first decision. So that was a lot more than I wanted to say. But with all of that, we have this world of AI. We have a company's inability to make a decision. And then we have this command and control. Help us guide, like if I'm listening to you right now and I go, I get it. I mean, Neil is telling me that AI is moving so quick. I gotta make decisions faster. Where do I start in a company, and how do I start to untangle the knot of culture that we've created to move into the world we're in now?
Sure. So there's a number of practices, and I really try to focus on what are the things that we can go back to our desk and start doing. And it's there's a way in which it's the same. There's certain practices that are the same regardless of where you are in a sort of traditional hierarchy. A simple 2-word phrase that I describe for people is just delegate first. And this is an approach that, remember, Sam Altman of OpenAI in January said, we're going to move all of the work that we do, not just software development, but all of our work into this agent first or delegate first kind of mode the next few months. And so this approach is essentially, I could boil it down to this, whenever we think about something we want to create, a new outcome, a new deliverable, whatever it is in the workplace, we ask ourselves, like, how could I delegate this to an AI or to an agent or a set of agents? And we could get more specific than that if we wanted to, but that is the mentality that instead of just doing the work, how can we delegate first? And the reason for that is severalfold. Like, one is this is what starts to create the shared context between what I know about what good looks like and what needs to be produced, and what are the guardrails and goals within my team, within my organization. AI needs to have all that context. But then also, just like when you start working with a new college intern, say, um, we don't know what they're capable of until we start
Right.
giving them assignments, right? Delegating to them, and you don't want to give them some high stakes assignment at first. You want to give them something where if they fail, as you were saying, it's not a problem, and they can just try again. But then we learn, and they learn, and we just iterate. Continuously delegate to build the context and also to understand what are the capabilities, and given that they're constantly changing, sometimes we want to delegate something that didn't work with a previous AI model, say, and now with a new AI model, we can try delegating again, and things do work that didn't before. So this mindset of not just, well, I'm just going to do the work, but how can I delegate it to an agent? And it might slightly longer in the immediate, but in the medium and long term, it could be benefit all around, right? So that is one. I think the most practical, immediate answer to your question
Yeah.
is that this is an approach. Um, let's go where you want to go in terms of
So,
evolving that.
when I think about that, I don't know about you, but when I work in size companies, and AI is not my area of expertise, but it's rare that I do not have a leader ask me about it. And the biggest resistance that I'm seeing is this fear of failure as it relates to it, in the sense that I'll delegate something to AI and it won't do it well, it won't do it accurately, it won't do it. So I'm curious, what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing organizations and leaders make around AI, and what are some of the companies that are, so many companies, it seems to be that AI is almost like a pulling down on the company versus propelling it forward. And for those very few companies that have figured out how to use it that you're working with, what's the difference there?
So the simple answer about what's the difference there is, and I think this is part of the public discourse, that I'm not the first one that you're going to hear saying this, but there's a huge difference between just trying to apply AI to your existing workflows or existing operating models, your existing sort of structure of who's responsible for what and who does what, because you're just going to get at best a faster version of what you're already doing, right? But the companies that are really, I mean, to your point about startups or Shark Tank, right? These sharks are saying
Yeah.
our advantage is speed. Um, there's only so much acceleration you can get within a model that requires a certain approach to human, committee-based decision making, for example, a certain kind of delegation of labor that is much more static, like much more slow moving. Um, the companies that really are getting the benefit of AI, and they still are relatively few, to be honest, are ones that are going back to the drawing board in terms of how they do what they do, how they produce the outcomes, the product, the services that they exist to produce, and setting aside what most of us in established businesses tend to think of as the essence of the business, which is the how we produce those products and services. Right? Like, forget that the how is not ultimately the purpose or the reason for a business existence, right? It's the what, like
Yes.
what services we produce in the world, but how we. So the benefit of AI is that it is a very different set of capabilities or mechanisms for producing results, and the way it works requires reorganization, redesign of work, and that's a hard thing to do, to be honest, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
much easier if
Sure.
you're a leader, if you're a CEO, to just say, we got Microsoft Copilot, it's now part of your Microsoft subscription for everybody in the organization, to start using it. Use AI, people. um, Never mind the fact that, like, Microsoft Copilot is still, like, it's not the state of the art. um, it does certain things, but it's not keeping up with the leading edge of what's possible. But also, again, like, if that's the mandate from high within the company, you're not going to have the result of redesigning or sort of reconsidering how we produce what we're producing. Right? So so it is a challenging task. I mean, disruption is a word that's been used countless times for decades.
Sure.
Actually, it's not the first time we've been talking about disruption. But um, I think for businesses, there's hardly anything that is more disruptive than um, how do we design work? Like, how do we uh, structure our organizations? What roles do we need? What do we need each person to do, be responsible for? Like, all of that, to get the benefit of AI, we have to like revisit all of those answers that are so well established. So that's really how I understand, the difference between companies that are succeeding, they're redesigning workflows, but from companies that are not, which are just trying to like, accelerate existing workflows. But the way AI works and needs us to work is quite different. Again, this shift from being mostly doers to mostly deciders is the real critical shift for each of us as kind of individual contributors and as well as managers. So um, that is a profound shift. It's a challenge to our identity. It's a challenge to the expertise we've built over our careers, and so I guess the good news is that we're all in this together. It's still early days. We're figuring this out, and I think podcasts like yours, like how we think, feel, and act about uncertainty, which I'm looking at right now. I mean, that is, if there's one word to characterize the moment, it is uncertainty, right? And we're
Yeah.
um, going to need to not just to get the benefit of AI, but to be successful across the board, get comfortable with a level of uncertainty. You're asking about, you know, near future versus further future. I think, um, certainty is something that is, in some ways, it's always an illusion. Like we can imagine that things are certain, but of course,
Right.
things come out of nowhere. Like imagine COVID, of course, that very few people were anticipating that in a sort of practical way. Most of us have lived through it. That certain is reality. And so, um, getting comfortable with that, developing the ability to just to go with the flow of all the capabilities is critical. Right. So that was a lot, but try to tie together all these different ideas, Meredith.
Well, I think the thing that's so interesting about what you're saying is the fact that it's not only about redesigning the roles, but you have to be in a perpetual state of redesigning, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're because it's the I think about I probably started using AI a year ago, and how I used AI a year ago and how it impacted my role is very different than how I use it and how it impacts my role today. What it's freed me up to do and what it's allowed me to do. And I have no idea where this was going. I was meeting this weekend at the National Speakers Association with a very successful friend of mine. He runs a multi-million-dollar company, and he's pretty sure that AI is going to replace exactly what he does within the next 2 to 3 years. And we were having a very calm conversation about it. But think about that. I mean, this company, I love the fact that he was not putting his head in the sand, right? He was not hiding from it. But the truth is that in the next, 3 to 5 years, if it takes that long, what he does will be done by AI, and he needs to begin to rethink his business and his company now. And I think that all of what you're talking about is truly a mindset. So I imagine this happens to you quite a bit. I mean, it is. I find very few people to be visionaries, maybe a few more to be strategic, but most people think tactic to tactic, even if they're CEOs leading a company. And you're standing in front of a group of CEOs, huge audiences that you speak to. How do you convince, let me not ask you how do you convince, but what's your goal with people? Like, I find so many people playing with AI, but not really integrating into their lives and their companies and really looking for what is your goal when you speak to audiences and what's like how do we get people where even to begin to make the journey they need to make because if they don't get on it, they're going to be so far behind, right?
It's true. So, and it's interesting because I don't think about this so much consciously, but people have observed in me that have seen my talks that what I present is a calm, optimistic view of the possibilities that this technology brings to us, uh, and and so I do think that is sort of constitutionally where I am. Like I really, um, it's really important to me that we remain calm, that we are engaged in productive dialogue and collaboration with each other around this. Like I mentioned, this is early days. We're figuring this out together. I love, Meredith, that you described how over the past year, how you use and engage with this technology that really has moved from being a tool that we command to something that's more of a participant in our work. Right? That's another theme, tool to participant that I speak about. But you've adjusted, like you've evolved your own way of relating to it and using it. Um, I have to, one of the things that comes up for me as a really valuable analogy, I think, is that any of us who have had children, who
Yeah.
parented children, or even if you haven't, maybe you've had a child that you've seen grow up, you're someone in your family. Um, the way we, especially if we've had them in our homes as parents, constantly, especially in their early years, adjust like how we create space for them to grow and learn, like how they can, from a baby or an infant to a toddler. I mean, you have to set up your home differently. You have to
Yeah.
constantly evolve the context to not just create safety for the child, but also enable them to develop their own capabilities, right? So that kind of constant evolution, I think, and the fact that parents everywhere have done this and are
Yeah.
doing this as we speak, um, to me gives me encouragement. And I think it should give people encouragement that we are very adaptable creatures, and I think in some ways we are parenting AI, like we are parenting it into this constantly evolving role in our teams, in our businesses, in our lives. And to go back to your question about how people can best start to especially if you're early days, like how can we start to integrate this into our lives better. um, the great news is that the leading tools products, will say, I mean, in the industry they call them harnesses now, like Claude Cowork, ChatGPT Work, ChatGPT Codex. All of these are products that are very good at, in a very human seeming way, helping you learn what they can do, right? So you literally can just show up and say, here's what I do, here's what I care about, here's how I spend my time. How can you help me with this? And you will have a handheld experience being walked through that. But it's a great place to start if you literally know nothing, you've never used any of these tools. Right? Um, so So that's, I think, a great place
Yeah.
to
I
start.
I,
And
I
and then going back to this idea of delegate first, right? I mean, as you get into, like, if you were to start now and you've never used any of these chatbots, you'll very quickly get to a place where um, they'll say to you, do you have trouble dealing with your email? Because you can delegate that to me and I can summarize every morning, like what's come in, what are the newsletters in your inbox that you can maybe just get a summary of and then archive, what is the most important uh, personal emails or emails from your boss that you need to handle right away, and providing that layer of supportive intelligence around what you already do, what matters to you as an individual, in your work, is a great place to start too.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing you're saying is start. I mean, I think that that's years ago. This will date me, but I was in a session on social media when social media was just starting out, and somebody raised their hand and said, I think this is a complete waste of time. And the speaker said, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's a complete waste of your time. But if you don't waste your time right now, by the time it becomes mainstream, you'll be so far behind, you'll never be able to catch up. And I have remembered that for, gosh, it's been close to 20 years now. And I think about, like, I think about where AI has evolved for me was definitely a tool that I used to becoming far more of a thought leader in I mean, a thought partner. Thought partner is
Yes.
really what I'm looking for. Is that I give it context, and then it helps me with that. And some of the advice I take, and sometimes I push back, and I'm like, nah, that's not quite right, not where I wanted to go. And it's just and it's created, like, I have a meeting after this for I've got a meeting with my executive assistant, and what we're talking about was we both put everything we needed into AI, and then we're having a discussion of how to make a strategy going forward based off what we pulled out of our third employee, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So yeah, so amazing. Yeah,
So you're working with it like it's another participant on your team. And I think that I really like to focus on these mental models, like doer to
yeah,
decider, what clock drift is, having an AI be a participant. Like these simple named mental models, I think, are really helpful for people to. I think they're calming, right? I think they kind of
yes,
address that need to, oh, like I understand what this is. We've done this before. We've parented children. We've adapted to other changes like that came out of nowhere, like COVID. Like we are adaptable creatures. We can deal with constant change, even,
yeah,
and so yeah, I'm looking at ask for change here. I mean, in some ways, maybe some of us didn't ask for this change, but I know we can handle it. I'm
yeah,
confident
yeah,
in human adaptability.
yeah, yeah. So it's hard to believe, but we are at the end of this podcast. And I always like to end with two questions, and you can answer them in either order. What is your one piece of advice out there for somebody struggling with uncertainty, struggling to shift how they think, feel, and act about all of this uncertainty? And then how do people find out about you, find out about your work, and follow the work that you're doing?
So I can answer in that order, Meredith. Thank you, yeah, so much for your time. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
So it seems very technical, but I'll just reiterate this approach that I described: delegate first. And we're talking about AI. Um, and again, I'm reminded of how we deal with our own children. At some point, like the way to create a highly capable offspring, right, is to give them as much responsibility or opportunity to build capability, to do the things that will make them grow and become more effective, more fulfilled, and all that. And not all of those metaphors of fulfillment say really apply to AI, but the creating the capability of shared context, like you said, maybe the interaction or what comes back is not quite what you wanted, but then you can correct it, provide better context. We do the same with other humans, interns, children. Delegate first approach is really, I think, the most important takeaway for
yeah,
anybody, and include from C-level all the way to newbie, I would say. In terms of following me, my website, running.com, has my current speaking topics. We didn't talk about it, but I'm primarily a keynote speaker right now. I also lead key shops, like extended keynotes that are very action oriented for leaders, primarily in corporations.
yeah,
I do that in the context of corporate strategy, retreats, as well as large conferences. So reach out on my website. There's also media that are covering, what it looks like when I'm on stage, what I'm speaking about. And then, honestly, LinkedIn and Instagram, I'm happy to provide. I'm just Neil Redding on Instagram and on LinkedIn. You can just search for me, the Near Futurist. You can find me. We can put things in the show notes as well if that's something
yeah.
we do.
Yeah, Neil, we'll put that all in the show notes. And I really want to encourage the audience, if you're looking for a speaker on this topic, it's really feel like everybody speaks on AI right now, but Neil really has an innovative approach to it. And I love the fact that you were described as calming, because I think that is something that is not only true but very needed in today's marketplace. I want to thank you for being an amazing guest, for a rich conversation, and I want to thank all of you for joining us for another episode of Ask for Change. And remember, together we're going to shift how you think, feel, and act about uncertainty and turn it in to your greatest competitive advantage. I'll see you next week.